Can get into the mic. I was going to turn on my mic, but I find out that each one of these kind of work a little differently, and technology doesn't always play nice with me either, but my name is Aaron Bill. I don't like to brag about this because the preacher is the preacher of the person who is the person. And what I mean by that is I'm the fourth generation preacher in my family for Church of Christ. My dad, Mickey Bell, preached for 30 years before he passed away from cancer. And then my grandfather preached. He was Paul Kidwell Sr., and then my great-grandfather preached as well, and he was C.T. Kidwell, Clay Taylor Kidwell. But I am just Aaron Bell. I am just who I am. My wife, Shayla, me and her met in college, and, we didn't really start talking until after college. It's funny how that worked out. We got reconnected, and we started talking a little bit, and after 6 months, I guess she decided she wanted to keep me. And I thought, well, maybe she will keep me. So we got married shortly after, and we're going on 5 years. But I'm so thankful and blessed to be here this morning. I hope y'all will come get to know us. I won't bite, I promise. I absolutely promise. My wife might, but I won't. No, she won't either. She ran a bakery where we currently live. So believe me, she is sweeter than I am. But this morning, we're going to be in John chapter 11. John chapter 11, and you may be familiar with this story. This is the story of Lazarus. And the first 3 verses give us the setting of what's going on. And it says, now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. So it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. So here's the setting. Jesus is teaching right now, far off. He is with his disciples, and he's giving a good lesson, reaching the lost. But at the same time, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are here in Bethany, and Lazarus has fallen ill. So they call out to the Lord, knowing of his great power, knowing who he is, because we'll later find out, the verses will tell us that they are close friends of Jesus. And it's not just close friends. Jesus saw Mary, Martha, and Lazarus as a place of comfort for them. They were close friends. I mean, we know that feeling of when we go to someone's house, and it's not a stranger's house by any means. It's home. This is the sort of feeling Jesus had for them. So let's keep reading with verse 3. And it says, so the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. And when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. So here we get the knowledge that Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are very close to him. And he was grieved by what he had heard, but he said that this illness will not lead to death. Well, that's a very strange thing. Because they were sitting there and they understood that he was going to die in this moment. They kind of knew that this was a grim situation. But knowing that he was going through this situation, he decided to stay a few days longer. Now that's a little odd, because normally if you know that your good friend is sick, you just want to run out to them as quickly as you can be. You want to be right there at the foot of their bed. That way you can give them comfort and strength during this time of hardship. But he decided to stay a couple days longer. And what I believe is the reason for this is those few extra days made sure that the people knew that this coming act he was about to perform, this miracle he was about to have happen, was going to be truly from God. But he stayed, and he loved Lazarus, and he loved Mary, Martha, and he said that this illness does not lead to death. There's a little nuance within the Greek here. There's two different Greek words that are used for the fact that this will not lead to death. Now, one of the uses means a temporary death. It means to be put asleep. You know, there were people back during that time and age that believed that when you fell asleep, you died temporarily. It was that moment in which you were in just a temporary slumber of death. And then you would rise up in the morning and come back to new life in that way. But the death that he's talking about that he's not going to have is thanatos, which is this word that means eternal death. It's that final death that's within its way. You know, when we die and we draw our last breath, that is it. It is that final breath. And he's saying it's not what Lazarus is going to have is not going to lead to that eternal death. It'll be temporary. And they may not have understood all of what was going on there. So, now, starting with verse 7, then after he said to the disciples, "Let's go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you are going there again?" Of course, the disciples cared for Jesus. They loved him. They did not want him to be hurt, so of course they had this awareness. Anybody who feels compassion for another person would feel the same way. You know, if your best friend is about to go step into an area in which seems like a war zone, you wouldn't want them to go there anyway. So they came and they asked him, "Hey, these people are trying to take your life. These people are seeking to kill you right now. Why would you want to go back there? Why would you purposely go in harm's way?" And he gives them a good answer. He gives them a good reason for this. He says, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? And if anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of the world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." So here in this moment, he's trying to put an image out, an image about the heart of a faithful man in his service. You see, they could only work during the day hours. It's not like they had lights like we do today, electricity as we commonly can, so that when it gets really dark at night, we can come here and close all the doors and just turn on the nice light bulbs we've got and be able to see each other still. So there was a work day in which the sun rose, they would go out and work. And when the sun went down, they would go back into their homes and they would cease their work. And Jesus said, "Is there not 12 hours in the day?" He's saying the sun's still up. The lights are still on. There's still good work to be done. So he was trying to teach his apostles that of his work attitude, of his way of life, of what he wanted to do. He said, "When there is work to be done, I will work." He told his disciples earlier, whenever they would sit there and tell him to go and to work, "Lord, take a rest," he said, "Do you not look out and see that the field is white for the harvest, and the laborers are few?" Jesus always had a heart of desiring to work and to teach others, and he desires for Christians to be the same way. And his disciples had a good lesson in him, because he said, if there is time for us to work, let us work. Okay. After saying these things, he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. And the disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking a rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly. Jesus had to do that quite a few times, especially with parables. His disciples would always come to him and be like, Lord, we just don't understand what's going on. Please teach us. We want to know what you've come to teach us. So he would talk in more plainer ways to allow them to understand the wisdom of God's word in their heart and for their life. Lazarus has died. That's a powerful statement. They're saying, Lazarus has died. You think a couple of questions might be asked afterwards. Are we still going? These people are trying to kill you. Your friend has already died. Are we still going to this area? But he goes on to say, and for your sake, I am glad that you're not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to him, his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. They weren't quite understanding of what he was talking about. They didn't quite understand what Jesus was about to do in front of them in that moment. He thought it was maybe a physical death for a spiritual gain. Thomas was always one that kind of had trouble with doubting and not understanding what was going on. But Jesus said, for your sake, so that you can know truly who I am, to know what I can do. For your sake, I'm glad you are not there. So let us go. Now we're getting into a section in which we're going to come to where Lazarus is, with verse 17. Now then, Jesus came, and he found Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. I want to take a note right there. At this point, the body would have started to smell. There would have been a stench to it. This rigor mortis would have already sat in. The body would have started to be a little bit stiff as stone. And even with the wrappings around him, he would have had this kind of air about him in his body. But he was dead for 4 days. And as they got close to Bethany, that was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console them concerning their brothers. So then Martha had heard that Jesus was coming. She went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Now you might be wondering, why Mary run to him? If she heard that Jesus was coming, why didn't she just stay where she was? Well, many Jews had come to gather. Gathering for a death was not a small feat during the Jewish day. This was a big thing. There was usually a week of grieving, and this was just heavy and sorrowful grieving in which they would sit there and cry and come together as a community, and they would wrap their hearts around the person who had lost. And this was a big, long ordeal. And past that would be another couple weeks of just normal grieving in which the community would still come together and they would wrap their hearts around people. So this was a big gathering. This was something in which many people would come together for from far off, as well as that were near in the community. Some among these people might have been those who were seeking Jesus' life. You understand, the disciples had that fear of this. They were worried because there were already people who were stirred in the heart trying to take his life, wanting him to go away. So I believe Martha thought of this in her heart. She saw the people coming. She saw the crowd, not wanting Jesus to be mixed up in this crowd that may come after him. She ran out to him. And she came down on her feet. And here's a moment in which we start to see Jesus' human side about him. We understand he's 100% God and 100% man when he came and he took on flesh and he lived on this earth. And we'll definitely get to see his human side here in this moment. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had not been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha had faith. She came down to him knowing exactly who he was. She was still grieving in the heart, knowing that Lazarus had died. But she also knew who was standing before her, the only begotten Son of God. You'll see that they believe that Jesus was the Son of God. They'll make a confession. But there was still grievance in her heart. She said, "Lord, if you had only been here, my brother wouldn't have died." But even then, I know that you are able to do all things. I know that if you were to ask God, all things are possible. That's powerful. You know, there are those who will doubt Jesus and his power. They will doubt that he was truly the Messiah. There were those that have unsurety of faith, and even Thomas, who was one of the ones who was kind of skeptical here in this moment, later on would not believe in his resurrection until they were in that upper room and he was able to touch the scars. But Martha knew. Martha knew exactly who he was. And Jesus said, "Your brother will rise again." Verse 24, Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the day of resurrection on the last day." That's a strong statement. Not everybody understood or believed of the resurrection that was to come yet, but they knew. They had a heart about them of exactly who Jesus was. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life." Ain't that truth? Ain't that just true as it can be? In Jesus Christ, we find the newness of life. We understand that when we share in his death, when we come up, we are a new creation, given the hope of eternal life that is to come. So is he the resurrection? Is he the life? Absolutely. Absolutely. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. Though he die, he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." Again, another powerful statement. To understand, confess Jesus as Lord, to know, yes, Lord, there have been people who've proclaimed to be the Messiah who've come before you. There are those who have led Jews away, but none of them were the true Messiah. Only you, Lord. Faith. Faith that stirs the heart. Faith that leads into motion. Faith in the fact that you are willing to open up your whole heart and dedicate yourself to the full belief of Jesus, exactly who he is in life. That's the type of faith that Martha had. In verse 28, when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, again, not wanting to stir up possibly the crowd that was there with them. She said this quietly. The teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise and quickly go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to Jesus was, and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, and before I read what she says, take note of the difference here. Martha came, and of course she was teary-eyed, and she said, Lord, if you had not been here, my brother would surely be alive. But Mary says this, and you can see the compassion that Jesus is going to have for them. This isn't a robotic sort of transaction. You'll see the human side of the compassion that Christ had for Mary and Martha in this moment by his reaction to what she says. She said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Similar to Martha. But you see his heart and what happens next. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? Things were starting to set in. Jesus understood that there was a plan to be, but the reality, that feeling, that impact, we've all experienced it, that moment in which you stand before a casket at a funeral. You were perfectly fine up until that moment you saw the contents of that casket, the body that laid there. But it was starting to sit in to him. The Lord, come and see. And he came and saw. And we get the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. It convicted him. It cut him to the heart to see a friend of his. These were people who were close to his heart. And he saw their death. And even though he knew what was going to happen next, this moment in which he understood the pain in which Mary and Martha and so many were feeling in that moment, his compassion won over him. And he wept with them. We're told as brothers and sisters to laugh when we laugh, to cry when each other cry, to sit there and have fellowship with one another, be unity of heart and mind. And Jesus exemplifies this because in their grief, he grieved with them. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? They didn't understand the purpose. They didn't understand that there were things that were done in life so that God may be glorified through his Son in life. This was for the purpose of showing Christ's power even through the pain. Then Jesus deeply moved, and the interesting part about this phrase, this word in the Greek that's used for deeply moved, it means to grunt, to make an utterance of noise, like a snort from the nose, almost like a horse or a donkey does. You know, it's one of those deep grievings in which you start to let the ugly side of you show. You know, that kind that you kind of want to look away and you don't want to let anybody see that side of you. That's the sort of emotion that was going through Christ at this moment. And Jesus, deeply moved, came to a tomb. It was a cave, and a stone laid against it. And Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by now, this time, there will be an odor, that he has been dead for 4 days." Is he dead? He's dead as a doornail. He's dead. I'm talking about, yes, he's gone, Lord. This isn't some sorta. This isn't some maybe on the edge. We wouldn't be grieving if this wasn't so. But Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." Then he had said these things. He cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to him, "Unbind him, let him go." Now I got to tell you, this has got to be a pretty scary situation for those who are around. God is powerful. He's able to do great things, and people are always surprised by what he can do. I think about Jesus when he calmed the storm. They were amazed at the fact that these storms calmed down when he said, "Peace, be still." But here again, you see a man who's been dead for 4 days that should be stinking, and he's in there bound up. Now, granted, this was a couple thousand years before The Mummy came out as a movie, so I don't know how they would have addressed this situation, but I imagine they would have been scared to death. This was a mighty act performed in front of them at that moment. And Jesus said this was all so that people could see the glory of the Father, the one who sent me. It's starting to set real good in their heart just who Jesus was. They're starting to understand who the Son of God can do and who sent him. And that scared them. You see, Pharisees and Jewish leaders, and especially Rome, doesn't like people taking power away from them. They don't like people coming and usurping their authority, whether it is just by word of mouth or by law or by force, by any means. But they saw a great power that day, and they feared it. Let's learn about what they say with verse 45. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together and the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs." This man has great power. This great man is swaying the masses. He has thousands who follow after him. We see the glory. We see the strength that he has. What are we going to do about this? You're going to see that they're worried about someone else as well, because you understand the Jews were under Roman authority. They were afraid of them seeing this as a resurrection, but an insurrection, a rebellion against the government at that time. So they had to think about, what are we going to do with this guy? What if Roman comes and squashes us out? What if they persecute us even further? What if they come after us because of what he is able to do? Verse 48, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe him, and the Romans who come and take away both our place and our nation. But one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that this is better for you, that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." I'm going to just kind of go over what the rest of this little section goes over. But here in this moment, Caiaphas comes forward and he says, "Don't you understand? It is much better that one person dies now than many die later." We got to think about ourselves. We got to think about our group. Don't think about what power he has, who sent him, which would be the same God that brought them out of Egypt, the same God that has led them in the wilderness, the same God that gave them prophets to guide them throughout the years and supported them and brought them back each time they fell away. No, they said, "Look at what this man can do. We've got to get rid of him." And from that moment on, they started to plan. You sit there and you think about it. This is one of those milestones. In our lives, we have certain milestones that go on. You know, we graduate from high school. We graduate from college. We get our first work. We go on and we continue on our career and we get that day of retirement. And these are all milestones within our life. Marriage, children, all of it that's going on. But this was one of those milestones in Jesus' life that was the real tipping point when they started to plan how they were going to get him. How were they going to do away with this man named Jesus? This is a milestone to the cross. That's the lesson I want to bring for y'all. I can hear the baptistry opening up behind me. I think that's what's going on. It's either that or the PowerPoint. But one of those is going on. So I'm going to leave that with y'all